Time Warner Audiobooks presents The Electrifying Tale of the Voltaic Cities, written and illustrated by Bordwell and Yuri Lee, read to you by the authors.
Prologue. To whomever it may concern of Enodia, we, the Catholian state, hereby proclaim our intention to commence war on your people, if not for your compliance with our request for your ceaseless lollipop accommodations to our city. Those of our suburban and rural areas are in great need of lollipop support, and with your generosity and assistance, we will be able to maintain a balanced state of peace and prosperity. The need for lollipops is more critical than ever, for the active stability as well as growth will not be possible without your helping hand in the affairs of our people. If you choose to ignore our pleas, we will have no choice but to forcibly take what we desire. For everyone's sake, we kindly request that you do as we have asked for the blossoming of our friendship and prosperity for the economy. With great honor and trust, the Foreign Minister of Cathalia. Chapter 1. The Chosen Ones of the Week. Maggie Primary, Margaretesium Oxing, and Magnus Negativo. Thank you for your service. Magnus froze. All of his prayers for the last few weeks had gone to waste, his plea for mercy ignored, as he stood, facing the outcome of the selection. God, this past month, it's more and more like the Hunger Games, someone whispered, eyeing him with a look of pity. The newly imposed law on the city dwellers of Enodia called for the donation of 2 lollipops from each of the weekly chosen ones. Thank you for your service and your kind act for the good of the state, they said. But where did the chosen ones go? Giving away lollipops meant that they were unqualified to live in the city. So what would happen next? As he saw others do every Sunday morning as the weeks went by, Magnus went up to the stage where the city's mayor was standing. His look of charisma and respect was just a mask, given away by the years he had aged in a matter of days. His wrinkles, pronounced and wise, told the story of a man with the fear of the world and the hatred of himself. Those who were called stood talking with him. Magnus noticed one, with the name he believed to be Maggie, being pushed to a private room with someone he failed to recognize. Then he found the others being steered away as well. When Magnus reached him, the mayor looked into his eyes and uttered a phrase he knew he would never forget. The chemistry of the world depends on the balance and sacrifice of ourselves. Don't forget it and don't ignore it. Magnus was utterly speechless, unable to do anything but stare at the mayor as he was ushered into a 4-walled room with all of his lollipops, waiting to see which 2 were to be sacrificed next. The next few minutes were those that Magnus could not place. All he could remember was a woman asking him for 2 lollipops from his pile of 8. Now one may wonder, why is it so hard to lose only a mere 2 simple statures? Well, it is because they allowed everyone, every diverse creature in our city, to have one thing in common: to be neutral. Even the loss of 1 lollipop would disqualify a person from having the right status to live in the city, because continuing to live there would hold them accountable for the corruption of the whole complex system of their community. Anodians had already lost many to the outside of this concrete jungle, and the suburban areas were getting more populated as the seconds ticked by. Magnus was soon told to grab the belongings of which he could carry. Shoved into a cab, he was brought to a world nothing like he had ever seen. No one understood why their lollipops were being taken from them, but no one questioned it as a result of the fear of being next. Hours passed as he watched the scenery blow by, becoming less civilized and more wild by every growing mile. Chapter 2. Magnus was dropped by at a reeky old cabin, where 5 others were sitting outside, staring at him with expectancy and curiosity. Before he could get into reaching distance, one of them already started to make the introductions. You have a positive status now, don't you? No worries. Welcome to the club. My name is Anthanesium, and here is Mr. Natron Ion and his wife, Oxivia. These two are Oxiver and Nitra Polyatomic, our neighbors. You're from the city? I was from the city, but these two couples have lived here for a while now. I'm here until I can get my lollipops back. For now, this is where all of the positive status city dwellers come. I thought the farms in suburban areas were just for certain families. You know, those who want to live here and are willing to give up their lollipops. They were, but ever since the government started transporting our citizens' supply to Catholia, now it's for everyone, for the balance of the equation. You see, I was chosen a few weeks ago just like you were, but the ions and the polyatomics are different than us. Well, we are descendants from magnesium. They are natives of the land, born and raised on the farmland.
Well, if the government has isolated us for so long, why bring us here now? Because balance is achieved. Those sent to the suburbs are in need of more lollipops, and these people have one too many lollipops. If a person from the city, like you and I, are able to find two families willing to give them their extra lollipop, both are able to lead a neutral, peaceful life in the suburbs. Brace yourself. You may not be able to go home for a long time or even at all because you are now a part of something much bigger than you can ever imagine. If you leave now, it throws thousands of us off, and the Anodian state won't be neutral, thus leaving the government unhappy and in need of more sacrifices to be made. In simpler terms, it's a ripple effect. And what happens if there are not enough families to help us? Ah, that's where the settlers come in. People who are looking to move to either Anodia or Catholia travel to a single airport, the Salt Bridge Station. From there, their destination depends on the number of lollipops they have. Hold up. They can't pick where they want to live? Geesh, Magnus, like I've said before, to stay balanced and neutral. This whole world that we live in is a scale. Throw it off a little bit, and it could lead to disaster for our economy and so-called friendship with Catholia. Anthanesium took a huge breath inward before continuing. You see that man over there? There was a person working in a yard about half a mile away. To Magnus, he looked like tiny specks in the distance.
That is Chloron. He moved here not that long ago. He had an extra lollipop in addition to the regular 8, so he was sent here to the Anodian suburbs. He is like the ions and the polyatomics families, where he provides lollipop support, letting this area become stable. It's a beautiful thing, really, if you think about it. It just means that we can't leave unless someone else leaves, which will make a mess of things. Well, if we're both in the same boat, why aren't they sending their people to the suburbs and making them give up their lollipops like us? Because they got no lollipops to give. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but according to my sources, Catholia has said that they would wage war on us if our government did not give them the necessary number of lollipops they need. Why do you think their city is growing like wildfire and ours is just shrinking? They say it is for the best for our little microcosm, but they seem to be the ones benefiting. Then again, if this did not occur, we would have to go back to our old life where the economy was at a standstill and our relations would be a mess. Think of it as though the light bulb would be off, or even a voltmeter, and there would be no electricity for our cities. We sacrifice our lives in the cities so that others can have electricity and a stable home. Anyway, as I was saying, their city keeps growing because they take our lollipops and give it to those who are short a couple, and then they can finally meet their requirements and move to where they always wanted to be, where the most life is. How do they get them there? By train, of course. Unless the tracks are under construction, closed, or backed up, they gather up the donated lollipops from the chosen ones of the week. Send it to Catholia, stabilize some people in their farms, make sure everything is balanced in both states so no catastrophes occur, and live in what they like to call harmony, but what I like to call a blackmailing toleration. Wow. Just wow. What? Nothing. It's just a lot to take in. You'll get used to it soon enough. Just don't get your hopes up about leaving. You're most likely stuck here in the peaceful world of balance and equality. Sadly, in my opinion, we're not going home.
Chapter 3. The hopper car was reeking of angst as the lollipops waited in deafening silence for the freight train to start its journey. Not one had ever been out of the state before, let alone their owner's hands, and the lollipops looked at each other without knowing what to expect. Why were they suddenly being shipped off to a foreign place? Were they useless now? Were their owners sick of having them? Their inner speculations were hushed by the whistle as the train lurched forward, bringing them towards their unknown future closer and closer. The tall walls of the hopper car made it impossible to see the surroundings blur by, but the open roof allowed for a clear view of the moon, a meteor. All of the lollipops saw it, the ball of light in the sky. It was far from being blinding, but bright enough to attract everyone's attention. It seemed to be flickering to life, slowly but undeniably. The worries and doubts that plagued them moments ago were melted away by the warm and welcoming illumination. The timeless ride eventually came to an end as the steady heartbeat of the train dwindled to a stop. The vast sky, cropped out by the rim of the car keeping them confined, did not even hint that the lollipops had now arrived in a different state. Still mesmerized by the enchanting light, they pondered in unison that perhaps this trip, the permanent departure from home, was worth it. Maybe they were contributing to the beauty and harmony of the world. Chapter 4. It was unbearable. The heat, the endless stretch of farmland, the labor, the people, the cows. No, that was a lie. The suburban area was a nice place to live, and the neighbors were nice. Alex Zinker was just complaining to kill time, to cope with boredom. There wasn't enough excitement in life for the spirited fellow, and he wanted to venture out to the great city, but he would never dare to voice his complaints out loud. His foster parents only deserved gratitude for their generosity in sharing each one of their lollipops with him. Plus, the old couple needed his muscles and stamina to tend to the fields, and he knew that guilt would bring him back to the farmland even if he managed to leave. The thing was, his positive 2 status made him ineligible for access to the city. He had to attain 2 more lollipops to be competent to live by himself. But how could extra lollipops ever be found? Alex Sinker sighed and shook his head, dismissing the dismal thoughts. He wiped the sweat off of his forehead and sauntered over to his cottage, where he knew lunch was almost ready. When he opened the door, Sully and Fate were already seated at the small table, looking at him expectantly. "What's going on?" Alex Zinker asked his foster parents. "We have great news," Sully replied, with a big smile underneath his shaggy mustache. "You made it!" Fate exclaimed, her hair bobbing as she gave an excited nod. What now?" Alex Zinker wondered if he had ever been this confused in his life. "Your lollipop application, of course." Fate rolled her eyes. "I thought you'd be more enthusiastic." "My... what now?" Alex Zinker knew that he had never been this confused in his life. "Sully," Fate turned to her husband. You surely didn't forget to tell our dear Alex Zinker about the application. The only response she received from him was a scratch of the mustache. Fate gave him a "what do I do with you" type of look before turning back to her son. Well, my dear, we applied for the new Lollipop Provision Program a few weeks ago. It's new in town, and those who are selected are gifted 2 lollipops each so that they can move to the city. Alex Zinker stared at her, rooted in place. There had been rumors about his government using war as leverage and wondered if this was connected. However, his thought was dismissed as she kept talking. Aren't you excited, honey? You get to see the great city. A few minutes might have ticked by before Alex Zinker managed to get a sentence, which was more comprehensible in his brain, out of his mouth. City, farm, chicken? Now it was Sully and Fate's turn to stare at their son in confusion. Alex Zinker blinked and tried again. I get to go to the city? With extra lollipops from where? What about the farm and the chickens and the cows when I'm gone? The bright smile returned to the old couple's eyes as Sully responded, Oh, don't you worry about that. We're getting a helper gal named Nancy from the Saltbridge station. She'll be arriving at the Cottonville airport tomorrow morning. And as of the extra lollipops, it seems like the fellow Anodians are being generous enough to donate their share. Lucky you, son. The rest of the day went flying by as Alex Zinker mused about what a city life was like. He arrived at the conclusion that he would have to see for himself. Nancy was a nice girl with strong arms and a big heart, and Alex Zinker felt better about leaving the farm. The farewells were short and sweet, and soon Alex Zinker found himself at the city gates with 2 guards standing in front. Their neatly trimmed mustaches gave them a sharp, intimidating look, but when Alex Zinker showed them his 8 lollipops, he was greeted with a cordial, Welcome to the city of Cathodia, sir. The tall gate swung open, and Alex Zinker took a deep breath in before stepping into his new life. Epilogue. Closed. Sorry for the inconvenience. Magnessa was upset, for this was her favorite clothing store that she visited often. Stores were going out of business recently as the city population of Anodia decreased by 30% since the beginning of the Lollipop Endowment. The mayor no longer held city gatherings for the selection and resorted to the postal system instead, most likely finding it easier to deal with the stressful business by mail. Magnessa continued down the street until she reached the apartment that she shared with her boyfriend. Shirts and More is closed now, she called out as she closed the door behind her. Greeted only by silence, she curiously went into the living room where her boyfriend blankly stared at a piece of bright pink paper. What's wrong? She walked forward until she could see the elegant script of the mayor. You are a chosen one of the week, Miss Magnessa Lossinger. Thank you for your service.
The glossary, which should clarify any confusions you may have, at the end contains the half reactions and full reactions of this story and tale scientifically. We hope you have enjoyed this unabridged production of the Voltaic Cities, brought to you by Ella Bordwell and Yuri Lee, with the production team of We Video and Chemistry 101. Thank you.